Hello, my beautiful friends, my fellow sparkly space blobs and cocoons full of goo, exploring how we are changing and becoming, and beautiful butterflies, and every and all forms in between all of these things. As always, I am so glad to have you here. We are in the energetics of eclipse season. And that means that the energy is quite big. And I don't know if you've noticed, I think you have, I think we all have, that this year so far has been very, very intense energy. We have been working with huge waves of energetics that have been really reformulating where we're putting our focus, where we're putting our attention. A lot of us are physically moving through that. And I always like to think about eclipse season. It happens every 6 months. So it's a really beautiful opportunity to connect in with our energy system, shed anything that's kind of gotten out of whack or doesn't connect, that is ready to go, also coming back into a bigger perspective and relaxing into that. If you've been with me for a while, you know that I really push back against this idea of using astrology to get us scared about the transformational process and about how we're changing and how we're getting to know ourselves. I think that's a really unethical use of astrology and symbolism and archetype and exploration of ourselves. I personally think it's really important to go into eclipse season feeling totally relaxed, totally in trust with ourselves, with our bodies. And in fact, this first eclipse, which is happening in Virgo, it's a total lunar eclipse that will be visible all across the Americas and is going to create that blood moon effect where it's this really reddish orange color. I'm so jealous of anybody who gets to see it. Is all about reconnecting to our intuitive mechanisms that have been coerced and co-opted to be part of the productive society. And so a lot of us have felt like we have been out of touch with connecting to ourselves. So we're going to really set the tone today as we explore this total lunar eclipse in Virgo. And I think this is going to be a really empowering conversation. Fantastic for anybody who's needing a moment of connection, of centering, of finding how to put your foot on the path next as we move through these big waves of energy. And just know that I'm riding them right there with you. I'm feeling through all of this in massive, massive ways. But I also know that this community of sensitive spirits and feelers and reflectors, we have some really beautiful gifts that are emerging. And I think this eclipse season is going to help us to really tap into those. So let's get into this Virgo total lunar eclipse. I think pretty much every eclipse season I say in this space that this is a time where we're working with energy that I kind of describe as the world between worlds. So we're working with a lot of nonverbal and nonlinear processes, which means we're working with images coming through, moments of synchronicity, moments of energetic work that it's difficult to put words to. And I think it's really important to put that foremost in our conversation today, because sometimes I think we are expecting that we're going to go into eclipse season, we're going to do a whole bunch of homework, and we're going to just know what's going on, and then we're going to be able to translate it into a to-do list that we can pursue moving forward. And I think it's nice to approach eclipse season, and particularly this eclipse season, from the perspective of just knowing that we are doing like a subtler process that we might, yes, feel physically or emotionally. We might be processing some of those waves of energy, but that we're also doing this subtler thing behind the scenes. And this particular eclipse season is also very much tied to the world between worlds, because if we just contextualize first this Virgo lunar eclipse that we're having first, and then secondly, the Aries partial solar eclipse happening on March 29th. These are all happening during Venus retrograde, right in the heart and core of Venus retrograde, which is moving back through Aries and then back into Pisces throughout the course of March. And this lunar eclipse is also the day that Mercury is stationing retrograde. So we're working with energy that is asking us to approach life from that less to-do list mindset and come into just kind of more of an abstract and symbolic power process where we're looking at the world and our process and how we're transforming from a place that maybe isn't going to translate into action immediately, but is very important on the energetic level. And both Venus retrograde and Mercury retrograde this time around are really asking us to take off some of the obsession and pressure we have to externally perform in order to truly get back in touch with our core selves. And this Virgo lunar eclipse is going to be amplifying those themes in really big ways. Eclipse seasons are always connected to some extent to the north and the south node of the moon. And we just recently had a shift from the north node being in Aries and the south node being in Libra to the north node being in Pisces and the south node being in Virgo. And this eclipse season is going to really be a mix of those two pairings, because we'll start with this Virgo lunar eclipse and we will end this eclipse season with the Aries partial solar eclipse. So we're kind of bridging the gap between what we've just moved through the last year and a half and what we're moving toward. And we're starting with our new south node, the Virgo south node. And this is really the heart and soul of this lunar eclipse and the work we are exploring with it. And as somebody with a Virgo moon, I feel like I'm already feeling the influence and the intensity of working with this south node. And I'm curious to see what's going to come through for me sitting with this total lunar eclipse in Virgo. So let's just talk through this, because the Virgo South Node, I think, is such an important moment. First of all, to give justice to the archetype of Virgo, and also just for us to heal our relationships to ourselves. This Virgo South Node is really helping us rework the relationship to this archetype as a whole, because here's the thing. I have a really strong opinion about this, and if you've been with me for a while, you've probably already heard me talk about this, but we're going to talk about it again because it's really crucial to the work of this lunar eclipse, which is that Virgo is often stereotyped and associated with things like perfectionism, being super detail oriented, controlling, anxious, stressed. You know, that's what Virgo gets teased for being perfectionist, basically. And wanting to have control over the details of things and having a hard time giving that away to others. And admittedly, sometimes I got that going on. What can I say? However, this for me is an interpretation of Virgo that reflects our modern society. It reflects some of the pain points of our modern society. And therefore, the way we experience Virgo energy and the Virgo archetype has been translated through the modern stresses of capitalism and production society. And that is part of the reason we are going to be exploring and playing with this and healing and repairing our relationship to Virgo, because Virgo is really, truly, as an archetype, tied to the idea of the gut and how much our digestive system is a huge part of how we experience emotion and experience our world. It's often called the second brain. It's also where, we often feel intuitive nudges where our boundaries have been crossed, where something doesn't feel quite right, or where something feels really good and we are pulled toward it. So already, first of all, Virgo is associated with the part of ourself that helps us to know things deeply. The other thing is that Virgo is about being a whole person unto ourselves, that we aren't just some scattered entity that needs to find a partner to be whole or to do some perfect thing, performance to be whole, but that we are whole in the process of coming here to live a life, of moving through all the different layers of existence. Virgo is associated with stories like Persephone and other stories of transformation and moving between the realms. So really, when we look at Virgo as an archetype, there is nothing about this archetype that tells us it's about obsessively working on details and wanting control over everything. For me, that is a sign that that natural innate part of our Virgo selves, because all of us have Virgo somewhere within us, some of us have it more than others, that Virgo part of us, that gut knowing part of us, that part of us that is responsive to our body in real time, it has been cut off a little bit and instead has been asked to focus on how do we control our lives in a way that is linear. Well, we get really obsessive about details. We make sure everything gets done. We can feel some of that anxiety that comes from trying to control the mechanism and some of these large systems. And so instead of really feeling like we're allowed to connect with what Virgo is actually doing, we end up, applying all of that energy and trying to do it in these linear, objective ways. where you're trying to be good enough, you're trying to be responsible enough, you're trying to make sure you've checked off every single box before you can sleep at night, and then wake up, in the middle of the night with all of the thoughts of the things you've missed. And so this eclipse is asking us to explore our relationship to how much we feel we are allowed to commune with the responsiveness of our body in real time. And this is a really complicated topic. And I know for many in this community, anybody who's kind of been told throughout their entire lives that their body's, signals are wrong and that they should just ignore them and push through, that has been a huge part of my experience. And it's been a really big journey the last few years to just learn how to listen to the most basic little cues from myself, to actually listen to what I need in the moment. But that is what this lunar eclipse is all about. I mean, we could just leave it right there. And so many of the systems that are working with us right now, including all of the social media apps and all of the overwhelm culture of the internet that can sometimes occur, has a vested interest in keeping us in the Virgo state that is about, obsessing over details. But reclaiming our energy to be in that responsive state, into that aware state, is really, really important right now. It's part of what we were talking about with the Pisces new moon we just had, where it was like, call our energy back home. This Virgo lunar eclipse is asking us to do that so much more. So some of the questions that came up for me with this are, what would life feel like if I were allowed to trust my innate knowing of my body and just my greater knowing, my greater intuitive sense of things? What fears or controls are no longer working to make the world more beautiful, loving, and safe, like within myself, but also within the world? What transformation is my intuition telling me is important right now that I maybe have been pushing to the back, or not listening to, or not allowing in? And what should I really be looking to for clarity? Am I allowing myself to go to those places? Sometimes, we'll just have ingredients right in front of our face. We'll know something about ourselves or our lives or what we need, and we will just willfully disregard it. We'll just say, that's not probably legitimate enough, because we've been told for so long not to trust it. And I think true intuition, isn't paranoid. It's not looking for conspiracy theories about why systems are taking us down or why we can't trust other people. It's the exact opposite. It is a very, very trusting, soft voice, which is often why it's also easy to get trampled over in this world of noise, because it's so soft that sometimes it's like, it takes a minute. It takes a minute to listen in and really, really hear it. So if there was one thing I was going to leave you with, it would be those questions, those themes, that really allowing ourselves to be responsive to our bodies is hugely important right now. There are a couple of books I would highly recommend. One is Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey, but you could also read a book by Jill Bolte Taylor called Whole Brain Living, which is all about working with the different aspects of our brain and the different ways they see and do things, and learning how to navigate between all of them. Two really good reads if you're looking for something to kind of hold you around this eclipse season and working through these energies. If you're looking for support with kind of learning how to navigate getting back in touch with yourself, and that's feeling a little overwhelming, or you just want a really soft practice, I highly recommend coming over to my Wild Dreaming space on Patreon, because I'm going to be doing a practice for how to listen to the anxious self and then move into a really big trusting space, and how to modulate between those two states of being, because I think that's such an important skill. It's one that I've been working on for many, many years, and developing kind of a way to walk that bridge as many times as I need to. I'd love to see you for that. Plus, we're doing our Wild Dreaming through Venus retrograde, which is all about doing kind of surrealist sketching, journaling practices that unleash some of this nonlinear thinking and get us really in touch with our archetypes and symbols and the things that are wanting to be reborn. So I really hope to see you over in that space. But we also have a couple more things going on with this lunar eclipse. We've already covered Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, the fact that we're working with South Node energy. And we also have two big conversations working through this Virgo lunar eclipse. And these are just adding layers of energy to our conversation. But before I get into these, I just want to remind us that a lot of times we're working with eclipse energy. We're in that world between worlds. Not all of our downloads or information is going to be totally clear, like how to act on it, what to do with it. So just remembering that, remember, you don't have to be doing tons of homework during this time. Relax into it. We're working on relaxing into and trusting our bodies, which I know that's a big lifetime learning for many of us, but so even as I'm talking about some of these more intellectual ways of interpreting things, I'm also just wanting to keep us in that feeling of flow and openness about how the information is coming through. But I do want to mention the two conversations because they feel kind of part of this whole idea of how do we come home and unleash and heal our relationship to Virgo, to our gut knowing. One is that this moon is going to be trining our friend Uranus and Taurus. And Uranus has been really in conversation with the moons for a little while now, a few years, I feel like. Uranus tends to be in the mix. But this trine is really beautiful because this is about the support, what is wanting to come forward, what excites you, what brings you to life, what changes are working in your world right now, what is calling your soul forward. There is a real element to all of this kind of connection to intuition stuff that we're doing this eclipse season that is about just what is bringing you to life right now. I think sometimes we can forget that in all the injustice and problems in the world. It feels like we are not allowed to go to those places, but it's really important right now. And it is a theme that's going to be coming up. So I'm really excited about that. Uranus is the agent of change. So where is change working? Where does change feel true and good? The other conversation is an opposition with Saturn in Pisces. So Saturn and the Sun are really, really close together during this lunar eclipse, and they are opposing our moon friend going through the eclipse. So this opposition for me is so, so, so helpful, so illuminating because, for me, Saturn is about foundation, and Saturn in Pisces is about the foundations of how we trust and build faith in something larger than ourselves. And what is our relationship like with that? What is our relationship like with that sense of faith in something deeper and meaningful, and the part of ourselves that's feeling maybe overwhelmed and stressed? So what practical elements are needed at this time to help you feel connected to greater vision? Do you need to do something a little bit different or carve out a little bit of time for that? Do you take your mental and emotional and spiritual health seriously? I think Saturn in Pisces has asked that question many times. Do you actually take this seriously? Because you need to take care of yourself. And this is a cornerstone of how you do anything else in life, include being a good person, include fixing broken systems, including, just caring for other people, or just living, just existing, just being able to be here. Like, do you take it seriously? We're going back to basics with Saturn and Pisces here. And I just really love that these conversations are asking us to come home. Come home. Instead of trying to put out fires constantly in the world around us and then just feel scattered to the four winds. And I just really love the way that this energy is asking for that kind of deep truth and honesty with ourselves, but that then leads to breath. And I'm hoping that we'll all be feeling that. We've come to the point in our time together where I do a little intuitive reading and feel through. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but really just approaching this lunar eclipse and this eclipse season with kind of an open mind toward yourself, relaxing into it. I think a lot of the answers are actually going to come from soft places. They don't always come from the hard learning. And sometimes it's easy to ignore the soft nudges that are trying to get us to pay attention, the places that are kind of calling us forward, and the places that maybe don't make 100% linear sense quite yet. And that doesn't mean we have to shut them out. So I just want us to approach it from that perspective. I'm definitely working in that way while also navigating these really intense waves of energy. They both can be happening at the same time, and I will say many of us might be feeling tired. We might be physically needing a little more rest during this eclipse season. We might be feeling like we're not productive enough. All of those emotions might be coming up, but I just want to remind us that there's so much going on energetically, specifically, that doesn't look like a nice output kind of situation. Oh my goodness, a Five of Swords. This is so perfect because this card has so many themes about self trust or the lack thereof. And it's a very fitting card, I think, for where we are in the world at the moment. Because that's a card that is like, what is the truest thing? What is the safest thing? What is true for myself? And Two of Cups. That's so interesting. Just the energetic balancing between those two. Let's pull one more to kind of cohere this whole thing together, because those are two very different energetic frequencies that we're working with. But that's so often the way that this work is done. We work with two contrasting frequencies, and in that bridging between the two, we find something new. And the Hierophant, this card I feel like has been popping up here and there, and it's very, very interesting. For me, what I see here is a process of coming into a different sense of foundation and clarity and trust and self-trust. And there's a lot of ways you can interpret these energies and these visions, of course, and I'm sure many of you got intuitive hits as you saw each of those cards, which is great. Let's just talk through this though. I honestly love that this showed up because it's so perfect for this Virgo South Node work we are doing right now, and how important this work is going to continue to be even past this lunar eclipse, because we're going to keep working with that South Node and keep repairing our relationship to intuition. But the Five of Swords is an image where we don't exactly know what's going on. That's part of its innate quality, is that these figures, we can't tell the motivations of any single person. This forefront figure has a little smirk on the face, and these other people are kind of in a defeated pose. We don't really know. And one of the ways I love to work with this image is to think about the places where we feel like we don't know what to trust. We don't know how to trust ourselves. Because when this card shows up, what we're being asked to do is to stop trying to outsource our sense of safety and security, and knowing what we need, knowing what our boundaries are, knowing what our limitations are, knowing what we are really needing, and bring it back home. Because we could look at this image all day. We could try and interpret the body language of the other people. We could try to understand, what they're trying to get out of something, what they're trying to control, what they're trying to manipulate. And it will never make us feel more secure, even if we know every single thought in these people's minds. And so this is always, and fives and tarot are all about that discomfort, that little point where we're being asked to shift or change something and turn our head to something else. And that's where these other two cards come in, because, of course, the Two of Cups is about symbiosis. It's about flow. It's about something that's easy. It's about something that's working. It's about communication. It's about the flow of ideas and energies that we can share together. And so this is that's the other side of this coin, right? On the one coin, it's like about distrust. It's about feeling fractured. It's about feeling like we don't have any trust of ourselves or anybody else. Maybe our boundaries are being crossed. We're feeling very uncomfortable with all of that. And then Two of Cups is about feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling whole, feeling like we can create some new things, feeling that trust. And I think something to keep in mind, just on a basic level with this lunar eclipse, is that we might be navigating between those two energy frequencies and exploring what they feel like. And that's part of what we're going to be doing in the practice for this lunar eclipse over on Patreon. But it's also, I think a really beautiful thing to kind of explore and not be afraid to kind of move between the two and see what comes up. And then we also have the Hierophant, which is a very complex figure. And there's a few ways we can work with this. One, it makes me think about Saturn and Pisces. It makes me think about how our foundations, this is a very foundational card, it's another 5, is about how we set up a foundation that cares for ourselves. But the other part of this card is about breaking away from old tradition and foundation that no longer serves. Part of the inherent quality of the Hierophant is a questioning of the established way of approaching spirituality, approaching wellness, approaching all of these themes that come up on the internet and in the spiritual community for sure. But part of the challenge here is to learn to trust ourselves and not always look to this figure to be the one to tell us, what we need next and what's going to be okay. Once again, not trying to outsource something we know inside, and learning to trust in a deeper foundation that we have from within. So there's a lot we can work with here. But I think generally speaking, there is this emphasis on how uncomfortable and exhausting and never ending it is to try and look for some kind of final answer of security in the world around us. Like, I think we learn that lesson so many times through life over and over again that, like, oh, there isn't like a nice, secure, tidy thing here at the end of this road. Now that I'm married and I have a job, and all the things I was told would just solve my problems. Now I have 1,000 more questions. Like, we learn that we have to come home somehow and find those moments of peace. And I think that's really what this lunar eclipse is all about. And it's about beginning the process of spending the next year and a half while the South Node is in Virgo and the North Node is in Pisces, to really start to live through those deeper values, those deeper foundational knowings, and how that helps us coalesce, come together, be in this Two of Cups energy, and build new foundations based on this symbiotic energy, based on this kind of care and attention to each other. And that is what I'm really intrigued about in the coming year and a half, and even just in the next 6 months, as we move through, because eclipse seasons also set us up for the next 6 months. They also set us up for what is next. There is so much to cover in this eclipse. It was one of those lunar eclipses I sat down today. I was like, I don't know how I am going to move through all of this energy and all of these themes. I don't want to overwhelm anybody with information, but I've really loved talking about. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about ever. Like I've already mentioned, I would love to see you over on Patreon, where I'm going to be walking us through how to navigate between that Five of Swords energy and that Two of Cups energy, and really support all those different aspects of ourselves. Like, we are also in our journey of Venus retrograde wild dreaming, where I am offering up a new practice every week. This is all about liberating our inner visionary and doing it without any pressure to be like perfect or doing a whole bunch of homework. These are like some of the best practices that really come from my heart, and you can watch. The first few episodes are already out and available to enjoy, so I'd really love to see you in that space. And I am wishing you all a beautiful beginning to eclipse season. Let me know what's coming up for you. How are you feeling? How are you working with this energy right now? How is your trust in yourself feeling at the moment? There's no right answer there. I really love reading about what's coming up for you. I will see you back here for our next conversation, for our next eclipse, to explore together and find home and centering in this space. I love you so much.